We live in neo-feudalism. This is not capitalism. This is where you have a underclass, right? A lumpen proletariat almost that's taken care of by the state. You have the very wealthy, and you have this kind of neo-feudalist working class and middle class in the middle that pays for everything. And the guys at the top, we've socialized the risk, that $1 trillion of infusion.
Before we start, we need to tell you up front we are not a licensed financial planning, accounting or law firm. This is simply an education program which will give you factual information. We do not give any general or specific advice around finance, business, investing, options trading or anything else. That is not what this presentation does. Please see a licensed financial planner when it comes to any investment advice you need.
I'm going to throw the man there over here. I want to do a reaction kind of video. I know this is what the kids do, right?
Oh, the cool kids.
The cool kids. And we're not the cool kids. We're not cool and we're not kids, but we'll give it a crack anyway. So,
with a shirt like that.
do you know this shirt? You know why I'm wearing this shirt today?
Because you didn't do your washing?
No, because my own beautiful girlfriend refused to be seen out in public with me wearing it. So I thought, well, okay. All right, let's get back to the show. We're going to do this reaction thing.
Reaction. All right.
Okay, so
let's
you
bring
ready?
it in. Who's this guy, Derek?
So this is Steve Bannon. Now, Steve Bannon is one of these independent journos who's been under real fire lately. They have tried to bankrupt him, basically, due to what he's been presenting, of course, which is more of your conservative sort of dialects and talks. Some people would say he's actually speaking the truth, and that's why they've been trying to censor him. But he's put it all on the line as far as his business is concerned, and has had to negotiate really hard in terms of what he keeps, keeping his business, keeping it afloat. It's really interesting what he says about the whole financial system and how it works, and it kind of blows up what a lot of people have wanted to keep hidden, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Now, I do have to say, courtesy of Twitter, we got this video off Twitter. What page was it?
X.
X.com, Highway 30.
Highway 30. So call that to those guys. Thank you very much. So let's get into it.
We live in neo-feudalism. This is not capitalism. This is where you have a underclass, right? A lumpen proletariat almost that's taken care of by the state. You have the very wealthy, and you have this kind of neo-feudalist working class and middle class in the middle that pays for everything. And the guys at the top, we've socialized the risk, that $1 trillion of infusion, right? Remember, the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve on the morning of September 18th, 2008, when they're in the Oval Office talking, is $880 billion. The balance sheet of the Federal Reserve on January 17th or January 20th of 2017, when Donald Trump raises his hand, is $4.5 trillion. The most progressive president in the history of our country, President Obama, saved the wealthy. And here's how they did it. They just turned on the taps of liquidity. We call it, the technical term is quantitative easing. Right. The not technical term is called bailing out the people who are guilty. Okay?
So you got to remember that in 2007, 2008, we had the global financial crisis. And that was when they had to save the banks.
Yes, that was Brown Brothers. There was 4 banks from memory.
Fannie Mae, Lehman Brothers. Yeah.
This is when I became aware of the term bail-in, because I didn't know about this before. I didn't know that our money was used to actually just support multi-billionaires. It's great.
So you got to remember there was like bail-out laws and bail-in laws. So they tried to bring those laws out in Australia, but it actually got, so credit where credit due. Malcolm Roberts, One Nation Senator, did a brilliant job. This law actually passed both the lower house and the upper house, and then he actually challenged it through after the Senate to the Governor General himself, and said you can't do this because effectively you're stealing people's money, blah blah blah. Same thing that happened at the same time as the cash ban, and got the entire bill overturned at the Governor General point.
Fantastic.
So just because something passes the lower house and the upper house, it doesn't become a law until the Governor General signs it into effect. So Malcolm Roberts was able to shut that down immediately. So absolute legend, Malcolm Roberts. He is effectively single-handedly saving cash.
That's a big call, and I tell you what, people like that, politicians like that, we have to support whatever party they're with. Look, just to talk about those numbers, because they were absolutely, just mind-boggling. So we're talking about, there was 880 billion. So we're fairly close to $1 trillion there, I believe. And the other one, the figure they were talking about was
2016.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, no 2008,
and then the one at 2016 was half that value.
No.
So that's what
it 3 something?
America had been in a recession under the
Yes.
Obama era.
Yes.
And Trump got them out of that recession. Americans working again. yes, the debt levels did go up. Americans who had food on their table were able to afford gasoline in their tanks, and they were getting jobs again. And
let's just check that data.
Because talking is $880 billion. The balance sheet of the Federal Reserve on January 17th or January 20th of 2017, when Donald Trump raises his hand, is $4.5 trillion.
$4.5 trillion.
Oh, I misheard.
So nearly five times more. So Obama jacked up the balance sheet. Nearly, what's that? Nearly 5 times.
Yeah, but this man, Obama, he was amazing. He got the Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing.
No. He got it for starting more wars than any other US president.
Anyway, okay, but so that's a massive, multiplication of debt there. Okay, so we've got Trump coming into power here. I'd love to go and see where this goes from here. All right.
The most progressive president in the history of our country, President Obama, saved the wealthy. And here's how they did it. They just turned on the taps of liquidity. We call it, the technical term is quantitative easing.
Right.
The not technical term is called bailing out the people who are guilty. Okay?
So
essentially, if you owned anything, you had the greatest 10-year run in history.
Wait.
Yeah.
Let's move to the TARP vote and whether you think, so now all of that is happening.
You have to do TARP, the first one you have to do.
Yeah.
You know why? Your fiduciary, when a guy like Bernanke walks in and says, I need $1 trillion.
So just so you know,
Bernanke was the head of the Fed at the time. Federal Reserve, the central bank.
He's the one that effectively told Obama, shit's about to hit the fan. We've got to do something. So back into it.
Right? You don't have time to debate. History's going to look at you. And he says the American financial system is going to collapse in 72 hours and the world financial system 2 days after that. You have global anarchy. There's not a person on earth. I don't hear these libertarians and all these, free market, let capitalism take place. Right. No. When they come in and ask for the first trillion in an emergency, I believe you have to say, okay, we got to do it. I don't know what went on here, but if you're telling me this is going to save me and at least get down the road, I'll do it. But remember, that's the first trillion. We kept on for another $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion. This is just bailing out the people that caused the problems. Got to think about it for a second. Goldman Sachs didn't lose any equity. None of the partners really missed any bonus payments. None of GE still in business. AIG, it all still exists. All the donors. Yeah. Okay. The reverse side of this. Remember, there is a corollary to this. It's quite powerful, and we know from the notes of the Federal Reserve, a guy named Richard Fisher, the president of the Federal Reserve of Dallas, argued this in the room constantly. He said, by doing this quantitative easing, which you're just flooding the zone with liquidity, we will save the institutions. And we will save anybody that's a big real estate holder or a hedge fund or bank. But he said, there's a huge reverse here. Number one, savings accounts, you're going to go to zero interest rates. Mm-hmm. Savings accounts are going to go to zero. So 5,000 years of the Western tradition back to the Marty Bannons, which is be a good householder. Get a wife, get a mortgage, get some kids, and you save your money. Well, now if you save money, you're a sucker.
Yeah. So let's have a look at that part.
Definitely.
What happened was, of course, to bail them out, they had to print a lot of money to save. Okay.
Didn't they print a $1 trillion note?
Look, I heard that. I don't know if it's real. I'm not sure if it's real. There was
also in The Simpsons as well.
It's hard to get change for a $1 trillion note.
Yeah, look,
unless you're going to Ukraine. So
yeah. I don't know. I tried at that deli in South Perth yesterday.
So just one thing I want to jump in first before this. So you started hearing them talking about house owners and all that sort of stuff, and interest rates don't go zero. So what actually caused a lot of this was actually the housing market. So in Australia, we have things called residential mortgage bonds. So they take all these bonds, all these mortgages, they group them all together, then they sell them on the international market. Okay. And the Australian government guarantees what the returns are going to be on those bonds. So it's a very, very good source of income for Australia as a whole. A lot of Chinese major corporations buy it. That goes onto the bonds markets and all that sort of stuff. So in America, what George W. Bush, I think it's George, the second one, the junior.
Yeah.
What he did, he goes, we're going to create a whole heap of mortgages. He started with 1,000 of them, and we're not charge interest for the first 5 years. And this is going to be for fresh nurses, police officers, young professionals, to get them into the housing market, give the bit of the economy a bit of a boost, and get these kids a bit of a step up. And then when I see how we're going, at the end of the 5 years, the interest that you're supposed to pay for 5 years gets added onto your mortgage. Okay, so you're still paying it. It's just you're deferring the payments. So what's happened? It was massive success, like really, really well done. No one fell over. Happy days. George W. Bush, in all his genius said, right, let's open it out to everyone across America.
Okay.
So all these people who should never have had a house in the first place,
Sure.
they should have had houses to live in, but they shouldn't have had mortgage because welfare dependents, disabled, Vietnam veterans that didn't have any source of income except social securities. Because when they calculated the whether you have the capacity to pay these loans,
Sure.
they didn't take the interest repayments into account. So all these people who in the first place didn't have the income to be able to pay for these mortgages all of a sudden got a house. And then when the 5 years comes up, they said, oh, you got to start paying for the house. They're like, in America, you just hand the house back. Not my problem.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, the housing market got flooded with hundreds of thousands of houses.
Yeah.
And in simple supply and demand, all of a sudden, all these houses that are worth lots of money just plummeted because the market was flooded with it.
You had houses on Zillow in Detroit selling for $2,000 to $6,000 in some situations.
Some in a couple of suburbs of Chicago, Detroit. There's a few of the other like lower socioeconomic areas. They were actually paying people to take over their houses.
Kansas City, $35,000 houses. They weren't fancy houses, but
they
wow.
Yep. It gets worse. So imagine you're in a street. There's 20 houses in the street. All the homeowners in the street. So let's say 18 of them handed back the houses. So let's say the house started at $300,000. All of a sudden, your house, you've made every single payment. All of a sudden, your house is worth $35,000. Why would you continue? Considering in America, if you hand back a house, it doesn't affect your credit rating.
Is that right?
Why would you keep paying a mortgage for $350,000 when your house is only worth $30,000?
You just wouldn't.
You wouldn't. So all these people who were good mortgage payers all of a sudden said, no, we're not paying it either. And they handed back their houses voluntarily as well. Because why would you keep paying a mortgage on that extent? Just write it off. I don't care. So all of a sudden, not only are the bad defaulters handing back their houses, everyone across the board, all throughout America, handing back mortgages.
Yet another example of how this ridiculous elitist class just have complete disdain, no respect at all for the common man, the everyday person.
What it is George Bush was trying to get himself reelected. He came up with a really stupid policy. He didn't think about the consequences. And this is a prime example where politics has absolute control over your everyday life. And this is why I've been harping on about this for so long. Everyone needs to understand politics because it determines absolutely everything that you can do. So I just love it where everyone blames the banks for the GFC. It wasn't the banks that caused this. It was George W. Bush. So think about how many people have committed suicide because of financial pressures put onto them during the GFC.
Well, they were. I wouldn't dismiss the banks as not having any responsibility because they were on-selling those products. They were on-selling those products, junk bonds, as a great product to invest in. So people who are pouring money into those things were losing money.
Yeah, but the thing is, George W. Bush allowed it to happen. So he had a responsibility to the American people and the world to make sure that didn't happen, and he did.
Yeah, so. And these people make these decisions because they're based on completely narcissistic reasons of keeping themselves in power.
So anyway,
hit the play button.
That's what's caused a lot of the shit in 2008.
Watch the movie The Big Short. It's a fascinating movie as to how that played out.
Yeah.
And it even happened in states like Arizona, which was a really solid, the beautiful homes in Arizona. I've lived, stayed with family in Arizona. I have a cousin, an uncle who owns is a realtor in Arizona as well. They were hurting because it was just all this equity dropped out of the market. Big time. You could pick up housing so cheap there.
And even to this day, because of the way America does their land taxes, you can even still pick up a lot of these really nice houses because they haven't been able to pay for their taxes.
Right.
So if you go in and pay for the taxes, you actually take ownership of the house.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Worthy of a mention too is obviously right now as we sit here, the interest rates in America are actually double, right, what they were when Biden came into office, right? So there's all these, again, these more pressures on the everyday.
Again, taking into account politics having an impact on interest rates. Let's have a look at Australia. We're due for a reduction in our interest rates. The Labor government come out with their budget where they pumped a heap of money back into the economy. Initial inflation rates went down. We don't go down with their interest rates. Then all of a sudden inflation went up again and it looks like we're getting another interest rate.
And part of the problem too with the US is basically homelessness has increased big time.
Of course.
Mix that in with other social things like they legalized marijuana growing in many states, all for medicinal purposes. Yeah, my foot. Majority of that, 98% of that is probably for non-medicinal purposes. And of course, that has hurt America's social fabric as well.
Yeah, I would think that the stronger drugs, the fentanyl, would be the biggest impact. But yeah.
There's a reason they call it a gateway drug.
Yeah.
So personally, I think alcohol causes more damage, but they're both causing damage to the social network. So anyway, get back into it.
Because it's broken the trust. That's the trust is broken. If you save money, you're a jerk because you're not going to get any interest pay. In fact, the bank's going to charge you. So there's been no, you can't put money away to save into the system. Number two, pension fund.
And that's a big one. Pensioners who save money, that generation squirreling it away, have really been caught out because there's no interest to pay. America had the lowest interest rates for years. You're getting like 0.5% on your money. Why would you? And that's when people had to start moving it into other assets to basically try to get a return on it, just to beat inflation.
So the other one on that flip side, on looking at different countries around the world. So Japan were starting to get really, really bad in this, and they saw it coming. So I have to give credit to Japan. They turned around and said, no, this is going to hurt. So we are going to go from one of the fastest growing economies in the world. We're going to absolutely stop it now dead to stop inflation taking control. They dropped their interest rates all the way down to, I think it was 0 or negative 0.01%. Just recently, because they've actually done that, their economy is starting to catch up. They've got inflation under control and all that sort of stuff. For the first time in 20-something years, they've actually got an interest rate of 0.01%.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So trying to go back to the glory days of the 90s, effectively. With
but totally different economies. Like globally, it's a totally different economy now.
Yep.
So, but I have to, like, again, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam's another one that they do the hard things when they have to. So there's an old saying, do the hard stuff while it's easy. So Japan had to make a decision. Do we deal with it now? Do we kick the can down the road? And Japan's going, no, we'll just deal with it now. 0% interest. It's not kill the economy to start with, but we'll be able to catch up over the next 10, 20 years or so. Well, everyone else, and look at Japan's, like, if you look at the foreign exchange rates between the US dollar to the Japanese yen. So when I was doing a lot of foreign exchange trading, it was $1.3 trillion a day was changing hands between the US and Japan. Okay. So there's still a huge, huge economy, but they did what they had to do to make sure they stayed where they were.
The hard work, the big decisions. All right, now I want to ask this question. We've obviously the show's coming to the later part. So with this video here, would you like to continue with this, or would you like to make some further comment on what you were seeing?
I'm happy to continue the video.
There's some really interesting bits coming up.
I'm glad that's what your answer was. That's what I wanted. Beautiful.
So I did jump back a little bit for that one. So just for context, they were talking about interest rates in America.
Funds. The pension funds are going to be destroyed. Today we have a $9.5 trillion gap between the obligations of the pension funds and what we've earned off the pension funds. Why? Because it went to zero interest rates, and the bonds that they can buy have no juice in them. Right. The other thing is public schools and all this. Even communities that are not leveraged can't issue bonds because there's no juice in the bonds because the negative interest rate is 1.5%. We've essentially put the burden on the bailout on the working class and middle class. That's why nobody owns anything.
Right.
But the millennials today are nothing but 19th century Russian serfs. They're better fed. They're better clothed. They're in better shape. They have more information than anybody in the world at any point in time. But they don't own anything. They're not going to own anything, okay? And they're 20%. If you mark in time against their parents, they're 20% behind in their income, and there's no pension plan in the future. They're all gig economy. We've literally destroyed the middle class in this country.
Yes.
Okay. And both.
So there you go. So just the audio is coming in and out a little bit. I think that's the recording. So what he was saying is the people in America now, the middle class in America, they don't own anything. They earn 10 cents a bugger all, and they're taxed to the high heaven. The serfs in middle-aged Russia are effectively what they are now. They don't own anything. They work their asses off, and they die with nothing. So,
but you'll own nothing, mate, and you'll be happy. You know that. That's what Swabby's got to say.
That's why suicide rates are the highest that they've ever been.
Yep. And look, he brings up a really good point. I mean, the obligation to, we all have a generation, what a generation we're at, millennials and this and that, whatever. We like to criticize them, but what are they incentivized with? Honestly, like really, because they'll never have what their grandparents had. Certainly myself sitting here as Generation X,
I think it'll change. I think it's heading that way. I think the elites have wanted it to be that way.
Absolutely.
Right? Certainly you'll own nothing and be happy. They've basically spelled that out for people.
Yes, I have.
But I think it's got to change. And I think that's what we got to keep in mind.
Oh, okay.
You're torn on it.
You are?
No. I'm not torn on it. I know exactly where I want to be, but I think everyone looks at the economy, especially like where we're in. Australia is a prime example of this as a single style government. We don't have a single style government in Australia.
What do you mean?
So most people think, oh yeah, we're in a socialist government, we're in a democratic government or whatever. We're not. So if you have a look at our financial system, let's go from the pay scale from the poorest of the poor to the richest of the rich. So let's say you just come out of school, you get a job. Let's say, you know, you're 14 years age, you're earning, say, $50 a week or $150 a week, whatever. You do a couple of hours here and there.
Sure.
You're getting not taxed at all.
Okay.
In fact, if you're in a lower social economic things, like your parents don't work, whatever, you actually get paid money to go to school. So there's youth allowances. There's all these government grants that are going out. So the government is effectively paying you to survive. So that's socialism. You're doing nothing and you're getting money. Happy days.
Okay.
Let's go with it. Fantastic. So as you get older and older and you start working, you start earning more money. So you're still in the socialist economy because you're getting taxed to high heaven. Like, what's the point? You can't get ahead because every time you try, the government just starts taking more and more money out for you. So let's say you get a really good job. You start working on the mines. You're earning $100,000 a year. You not only are you paying the higher tax rate, then you've also got Medicare levies on top of that, all the fees charged. You start buying a half decent car, then you get luxury car tax on top of it. Your GST, because you're buying better stuff, your GST component is actually worth more than what someone who doesn't buy such a great stuff. So what's happening is, it doesn't matter how hard you try to get ahead, you're still getting taxed to high heaven. You can't break to the next limit. And this is where I say Australia is actually a two-tiered social economy, because once you get to a certain point and you can switch over at any time, you can actually just turn around and say, well, no, I don't want to be in this system anymore. And I have to say, and I know this wasn't meant to be an infomercial for Derek, so do his course and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Because there's, when you understand the basics of wealth, especially like the basics of finance in Australia. So what happens at a certain point, you start setting up organizations, you start setting up trusts and different entities. So what happens is you take yourself out of that socialist system and you can actually put yourself into a capitalist system where all your living expenses and all your bills and everything gets taken out before you have to pay tax.
Sure.
So what happens, instead of paying the 40, 50, 60% tax rate, you're only paying, 15, 20% tax rate. You're still paying tax, you still pay your fees, you still pay your GST, but you're in control of your money. Correct. The government has less influence on you, and therefore you can start living in a capitalist system rather than a socialist system. And so it really shits me when I see things like this. It's people time and time again are telling people, like, this is the system we're living in. These are the politics. Now, you remember, these are the rules they set. They know these. They are living in the nice capitalist system while promoting socialism, because the socialist system is paying for their capitalist system. So you've just got to get yourself educated. You've got to understand what's going on, because it's not that hard to get yourself out. In Australia, even a garbage truck driver can be extremely wealthy if they know how to handle their money. It's the easiest country to become filthy rich in, but yet all these people are stuck in the socialist system they don't come across.
It's knowing how the game works.
That's right.
And it does take a time to get out of the system.
And no education system in the schools, any government-funded education system will never, ever, ever teach you how to do this stuff.
Why would they?
Because they want you to be taxed and paying it for the rest of your life.
Exactly. Why would they damage their customer base?
So, right? Going back into this, yes, the interest rates are zero, but that's actually an opportunity, because it means you can buy cash extremely cheap. You can reinvest and do a lot of stuff with that extremely cheap money and get yourself ahead out of the socialist system. So there's a bad side to it and there's a good side to it. The bad side is a lot of the retirees who are stuck in that system don't know how to get out of it, because they don't have that education. They can, they've just got to learn how to do it.
Can you pop the link for Blu Sky Factory there in the comments? And also, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's putting the comments through and the messages that we can see there. Absolutely brilliant. And I do enjoy the tongue-in-cheek there from old Deploy there with his Obama ended racism. The whole thing's farcical, so it's nice to point that out. All right, we're going to hit the play button, guys, because we have a few minutes left in the show, and I'd love to know your opinions a little bit more.
Political party. By the way, this is not about Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
This is the way the system works, and this is the way the system comes together to protect itself and to move itself forward. Okay? And so, because nobody understands even the rudimentaries of finance. Right, and they keep the public kind of economically illiterate.
So that was the end of the video there.
Okay.
And that's it, keeping people economically illiterate. That's the whole point of how that is. So once you know how the game is played, you can play it a lot smarter.
And I blame you for that, Derek. You're the one that opened my eyes. So.
There you go. It's your fault, mate. Your fault indeed.
Sorry.
Not. But also, we do have international listeners.
Yes, we do.
Very much so. Because obviously we're in the Westminster system. That's a political structure that we're in. It applies to America, UK, a lot of the European countries, and believe it or not, a lot of the African countries are actually also based off the Westminster system, same as India.
Sure.
So it doesn't matter what country you're in. Doing Derek's course will open your eyes so you understand where the fractional banking system come from and all this sort of stuff, and using the true economy. Once you learn that sort of shit, it's amazing how much time I've wasted. And I'm like, oh.
You have a choice to play the economy game, just as we've seen in that video, or to play it according to another preferred economy system. And I tell you what, life is a lot easier when you step into the preferred economy system. However, all hell breaks loose when you try to step into it at first. But if you're ready for that and can get past that, man, it really frees you. It is incredibly freeing.